Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the PartsSource Executive Webinar. Today's presentation, Applying a Formulary Approach to Healthcare Technology Management, will be presented by Mara Pare, Vice President of Client Solutions for PartsSource. Before we begin, please note, you have a control panel on your screen. You can minimize and maximize your screen by using this panel. You can also submit questions using this panel. It's located near the bottom of your screen. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of Mara's presentation. And if your question isn't answered, we'll respond to you individually after the event. All registrants will receive a copy of Mara's presentation and a link to today's recording after the webinar. This information will be sent to you via email. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Mara Pare. Mara is the Vice President of Client Solutions at PartsSource, where she spends a lot of time with leaders in clinical engineering and healthcare technology management to design and implement data-driven programs, partnering with our customers to reduce cost and time associated with parts and services procurement. Prior to coming on board with PartsSource, Mara had the privilege of working for Allina Health, a large IDN in Minnesota, leading clinical engineering operations and technician staff. So she's seen the direct impact that formularies can have in the healthcare provider space. Mara, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy and excited to be here today to discuss the topic of formulary management in HTM. Today, we're going to talk about a few different subjects. We're going to do a brief overview of formularies in general, what they are and how they've been used in healthcare, how to potentially apply a formulary in HTM, and why we should even be looking at applying formularies in HTM. So let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to set the stage a little bit about why this topic is so very important. I think now more than ever, our industry, healthcare technology management, has the opportunity to have a significant impact on lowering healthcare costs and also improving patient outcomes. Because the bottom line is that the stress continues to be on both improving the quality of care that we are providing while controlling and in many cases decreasing the costs of that care. There are still many unknowns in regards to healthcare reform, but regardless of that, we know that the pressure to reduce costs and increase quality is only going to continue to increase in our industry. And when we take a look at these numbers on this slide, we see that healthcare itself is close to approaching 20% of the US economy during a time when Medicare is projected to reach insolvency by 2029. So this is really not a great scenario by any means. The other trend that's being identified here is that healthcare supply chain costs are predicted to surpass labor as the #1 source of expense to hospitals by 2020. So the good news here is that many hospital supply chains are working hard to identify areas for cost containment and to identify opportunities for really streamlining their operations. And this is an area that clinical engineering and HTM can definitely play a role in. And particularly, they can play a role by applying a formulary approach to how we do our purchasing. I recently looked at a 2018 survey that was completed by the American College of Healthcare Executives, where they actually went out and they asked healthcare CEOs, what are the top issues confronting your hospitals today? And the #1 answer, what keeps hospital CEOs up at night, are the financial challenges, and in particular, the continual increasing costs for staff and supplies, and the extreme pressure that is on those CEOs to reduce their operating costs. So this is a huge area for us to be able to play in. One of the tools that the healthcare industry has championed and really embraced over the last decade is the use of formularies, and particularly they've embraced this in the pharmaceutical and the consumable supply space. So when we look at what does formulary even mean and what's the definition of it, the definition within this context is a drug formulary. And a drug formulary really refers to the list of prescription medications or pharmaceutical products that are developed and approved by each healthcare plan to encourage greater efficiency in the dispensing of prescription drugs without sacrificing quality. So this list of prescription drugs is going to contain both generic and brand name drugs that are selected for that particular coverage. So this is really a definition of what formulary means right now in the healthcare industry. In order to enact these formularies, healthcare systems were able to gather data on the effectiveness of alternative generic medications. They could compare the patient outcomes and determine that generic offerings were just as impactful and effective as the brand name medication. After they did this, they then compared the price points of the two different drugs, and they could forecast what type of savings they would see by standardizing their organization to the lower cost option. So by leveraging a larger total purchasing volume, they could drive the cost down even further and effectively reduce their inventory cost. So when we take a look at all of this together, it meant that only the most effective and safest medications would be used, that there'd be a consistent supply chain and inventory available, and that the organization would be driving the cost of care down by saving hard dollars. I think the other important thing to mention of note in terms of a formulary approach is that the formulary system, it really takes the emotion and the sometimes bias that medical staff have towards prescribing certain medications out of the equation. Instead, you have a system that mandates the formulary choice, and the choice is based on data, and that choice is made to lead to better outcomes in these 4 areas: supply, consolidation, patient use, and cost. So there's really, really valid areas in each of these 4 different topics where they saw increased benefits because of the formulary. In the supply chain world, they saw that it was actually easier to procure when they put formularies in place. They were able to keep less stock on the shelf, and they had an improved quality assurance and easier dispensing of the medication. When they went to actually have the patients use the formulary generic drugs, they were able to really focus in their educational efforts. They saw better compliance with patients and improved availability. Their physicians and their healthcare staff were able to get more experience with fewer medications. The sometimes bias that I referred to previously, those alternative options just weren't available for choice. And it really led to an easier management of the overall system, as well as lower prices and more competition. The Express Scripts National Preferred Formulary has saved enrolled clients an estimated $10.6 million since 2014, including a projected $3.2 billion for 2019 alone, while impacting about 2 in every 1,000 members. So that's just one statistic about the impact that a formulary approach can have on an organization. And with numbers like that, it really makes you wonder what type of savings and quality outcomes could we experience by applying a formulary approach to healthcare technology management. So now we're going to jump into looking at it in the landscape of HTM and clinical engineering. I think that one of the things that's very important to remember is that we have many various stakeholders within the HTM supply chain that are a part of this process. And each stakeholder is concerned with providing the highest quality care at the most cost-effective price point to their patients. But they all come at it from a slightly different approach. A clinical engineering director might wonder, how can I lower our total cost of service and empower my team to take on contract services and take them in-house? A technician could be really concerned with, how do I know I'm finding the best quality option for the most cost-effective price? Very often, supply chain is wondering how to enforce standardization and compliance and also manage the extremely long tail of spend that clinical engineering incurs. We're often working very closely with our IT partners these days, and they want to have integrations in place to save time so that they can focus on big initiatives like cybersecurity. And overall, the organization is always concerned with their finances, and they want to know how to reduce operational cost and improve the efficiency and utilization of their assets. So when we started looking at this topic within our organization, we came to understand that PartsSource purchases parts and services on behalf of thousands of healthcare providers and service organizations across the nation. And as a result, we have access to a lot of data and information. And when we review that data and information, we see that there is variance, complexity, and diversity across HTM supply chains. For over 1,000 hospitals nationwide, we actually act as their supply chain for HTM as they're members of our PartsSource Pro program. And after we've analyzed thousands of data points that are provided by our customers, we consistently see substantial purchasing variation among HTM teams, and in fact, varying levels of both quality and price points across the very same parts purchased by the very same organization. Our analysis shows that partially due to these variances, healthcare systems are spending upwards of 10 to 30% more than they should be on parts and services. The long tail of spend in HTM plays a huge role in this. Most HTM organizations are buying from hundreds, if not thousands of vendors, and often they're buying a part only once or twice a year. This makes it difficult to first determine what is the right formulary approach, and secondly, to track it in a system in order to standardize the purchasing behavior and choices. So to follow up on this topic, I'd like to show you a real-world example. We've removed the names and locations here, but this is real data from one of our customers. This is example data that we analyzed on behalf of a large healthcare system with multiple hospitals and clinics across multiple states. When we reviewed the data with them, it showed a vast inconsistency in where their sites were purchasing from. Several of their sites were very OEM loyal, while others aggressively spent with the secondary market. No site was able to track quality data of their parts to justify their choices. You can see here that supplier type shows the percentage of orders that are direct from the OEM versus alternative suppliers. Some sites were purchasing upwards of 90% through the OEM, while others were primarily purchasing through alternative suppliers. Alternative suppliers usually offer higher savings, but it's important to note that quality must be monitored systematically in order to assure that true value is being achieved. So to deep dive a little bit more into the data, we took a closer look and we even saw wide variation in the price point that the organization paid from site to site, or even from purchase to purchase over the same time period. If this organization had just been able to standardize to the lowest price point that was paid by them, they would have achieved the lost savings you see here in red. A centralized supply chain and platform is essential to eliminate this type of price variance and ensure the organization is getting the lowest negotiated price points. We at PartsSource fully recognize the struggle that most HTM organizations have to institute a formulary approach that mandates high quality, low cost options. And so I'd like to spend some time talking about the approach that we are taking with our customers to give them the tools that they need in order to solve for this. So the question really becomes, what if we took a formulary approach to maintaining the health and wellness of clinical assets? The question is, would the benefits still apply that the general healthcare industry sees in applying a formulary approach? Would they still apply in the HTM industry? I do think that in many ways we can look at an HTM formulary approach in much the same way that the healthcare industry has applied it to the pharmaceutical and supplies world. The same exact benefits would still apply. You could be guaranteed that when you need a clinical resource, such as a part or service, the choice is not left to subjective opinion. Instead, it is based on data and outcomes. By consolidating orders, we also experience a more consistent easier procurement process, improved quality, faster equipment uptime, and more experience with fewer parts and services. And the end result is more competition, driving lower prices. Vendor consolidation leads to fewer exception processes and fewer POs to issue, process, and track. So the PartsSource thesis is that we know what our HTM customers buy because we track those purchases for them and all the data associated with those orders. And in turn, we should be able to recommend formulary options to you using our approach of creating data-driven solutions. When we work with our customers, our ultimate goal is to design both a proactive formulary recommendation and an ongoing recommendation process based on our customers' purchasing behaviors and their specific equipment install base. And all of this will really result in more reliable results, more reproducible results, an ensurement that the part and the service that you're getting is a quality part and service, that you're getting consistent service, and that you're generating hard cost savings. So let's talk a little bit about the how. What does a formulary approach actually look like? How does one go about doing this? Where do you start? Again, I think we can go back and leverage industry best practices and apply them to the HTM supply chain. We can start by asking the following questions. What are the most frequently purchased parts at your organization? Are there alternative options that are available on the market? Of those alternative options, is the fit, form, and functionality equivalent to the OEM original option? Have you evaluated the quality, effectiveness, and cost of the product? Another really important item to remember is that once a formulary is implemented, it is just as important to review the outcomes of the use of that formulary on a regular basis. It's also equally important to identify new opportunities for formularies. Has your organization recently purchased new models of equipment? Have they brought on board new services? Do you have new opportunities to apply formularies to achieve better quality and higher cost savings? So now we're going to jump into establishing a formulary for HTM. I like to think about this topic in terms of 3 questions. Once you've determined that there is a viable alternative option on the market, then there are really these 3 questions to answer. Are the quality return rates within acceptable parameters? Obviously, we don't want to be purchasing a part that has a high quality failure rate because that really negates any kind of cost savings we could get on that particular product if the equipment has excessive downtime. It can also impact patient care, so this is a huge thing to track. Second, is it a cost-effective option? Is there a clear difference in price, all things being equal otherwise? And thirdly, does the supplier have a high deliverability rating? This is once again directly related to equipment uptime. We know that we need to have equipment up and ready for patients. If a supplier is not able to get us a part on time, when we need it, in the place we need it, then it doesn't matter if it's a cost-effective option in the long run. Without answering and tracking these 3 data points, it will be virtually impossible to develop formularies for your HTM organization. So I definitely recognize that applying formularies to HTM is a complex and time-consuming idea. Time and resources are a scarce commodity in the HTM community, and I know that there are a multitude of projects and responsibilities that consume your time. And PartsSource's goal is to bring tools and analytics to our customers to easily turn goals such as establishing formularies into reality. The approach that PartsSource has taken is twofold. One, we want to provide our customers with the data to make good choices. And once these choices are made, we want to enforce them in the PartsSource Marketplace platform so that they are consistently purchased by the organization. We have the ability to customize our procurement platform to house the formulary rules that your organization wants to set, specific to your organization, rules that guarantee both quality and savings. So I wanted to give everyone a sneak peek into a brand new customer experience that PartsSource will be launching this summer. We'll be launching our new PartsSource.com platform, and I wanted to give you a sneak peek of some of the new functionality that will be a part of that launch, specific to the topic of formularies. Not only will we have the current ability to suppress other options in terms of OEM original or OEM alternative, we can only show the formulary choice, but we can also brand the formulary choice as our client's preferred option. This branding and tagging makes it clear to the end user that this choice is the organization's approved option and the one that they should be purchasing. In certain situations, we know that formulary options may differ from site to site, or that at times there will be exceptions to the general rule. And so we wanted to account for that in a systemized and data-driven way. In our new platform, there will be an option to make an item as the preferred choice, and where an end user wishes to, they can request approval to buy a different option, such as the OEM original. The approval will require a reason code to be given and can be managed via historical reporting or an active approval process where it goes to a manager for approval or denial. Our goal is to make the system as flexible as we can to accommodate the many different use cases that might arise with a formulary approach, while ensuring that our customers are getting the highest value out of setting up formularies for their parts and services purchases. So I wanted to talk about some of the other benefits that we're building into our formulary management tool. And some of these benefits include customized data analytics. Our customers will be able to view how much they've saved by implementing these formulary approaches, and they'll be able to consistently review the quality outcomes to ensure that metrics are monitored and service levels are not being impacted. The other important piece that we're building into our formulary management tool is that customers will also have access to industry benchmarking to be able to compare how they are performing against others in the industry, and also to take advantage of formularies that are already vetted and used by other customers, realizing savings from day one as a customer of PartsSource. One of the things that we will be doing moving forward is developing out-of-the-box formulary options for our customers. And those will be available day one as a customer of PartsSource's to begin to achieve those savings right away. We will also be reviewing then your spend as a customer of PartsSource's on a regular basis to identify additional opportunities that are specific to how your organization purchases. And we'll be making regular recommendations as to what formulary approaches and rules could be set up to capture those savings. A key component to all of this is the reporting aspect. It's important for leaders to get insight into the purchasing behaviors of their staff, and we track every purchase. We track what options were offered, what was chosen, as well as the relevant price difference. We all know that the cheapest option is not always the right choice, but this type of reporting will allow our customers to also review the one-time purchases that can lead to large dollar savings for an organization. So now that we've talked through how to implement a formulary, I wanted to give a real-world example of how one of our customers has applied the formulary approach based on reporting and recommendations provided to them by PartsSource. In this particular example, we were able to identify that technicians across an organization were buying an OEM original version of a battery, while some were buying an alternative option that was priced significantly lower. After pulling reporting that showed no difference in the quality return rate of the two options, the HTM leadership team at that organization decided to mandate the alternative battery item as a formulary rule. By making this simple switch in purchasing behavior and mandating the alternative battery through a formulary, this customer was able to achieve a six-figure savings on an annual basis. And I just want to point out that this six-figure savings number was achievable on one part number. And that's the impact that putting a formulary in place can have on an organization. So as we wrap things up, I wanted to give a quick glimpse of the direction that the PartsSource formulary management tool is headed. We want to put a tool in the hands of our customers that makes implementing a formulary and achieving substantial cost savings as simple as the click of a button. So I think the takeaways here really are that formularies can be applied successfully to the HTM industry, that we can leverage the best practices that the general healthcare industry has seen in taking a formulary approach, and we can have just as much success in the HTM world. This approach can still offer options. We have options to make things preferred. We have options to mandate things. We have a lot of options available. And I think lastly, the results can prove substantial. They can include hard cost savings, standardization of your purchasing across your organization, and quality controls and quality reporting. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Mara. As a reminder to anybody on the phone, you can submit a question through your control panel. There's a Q&A box, and we do have a few questions populating now. So one of the questions, Mara, that has come in is, does PartsSource provide recommendations, or is it incumbent upon the healthcare organization to create their own formulary?
Sure, good question. Yes, PartsSource does give those recommendations. As I mentioned, we have access to benchmarking across the nation. We track the orders of all of our customers that purchase through us, and we're able to leverage that data to make formulary recommendations to organizations based on what we know both about your specific organization as well as the purchasing behaviors of other similar organizations across the country. So what we like to do when we're setting up a new program or a new customer is to make some recommendations right out of the box on items that we know that almost every HTM organization out there purchases, where they can have an immediate impact on cost savings by putting those formularies in place. And then, as I showed in the presentation, we also have built reporting to be able to capture any kind of missed hard cost savings on purchases specific to your organization. We review those with our customers on a regular basis, and we make recommendations to them even at the part number level where it makes sense to put a formulary in place. And we're able to project out the associated cost savings with that formulary rule, as well as any impact on quality or deliverability.
Okay, we have a few more questions.
Okay, so I see there's a question that there are some manufacturers that require OEM parts installed on their equipment. If they find a third-party part or repair, they will charge a full rebuild of their product. As an industry, how can we prevent how can we prevent that this is enforced? Are there any FDA regulations on third-party parts for medical equipment? Well, this is a very good and valid question, and something that I know comes up quite often in our industry. My background is not necessarily quality or FDA regulations, but I do know that we have, in my background, in my history as having been a leader in a clinical engineering industry, when I ran into those type of scenarios, I definitely did push back on the manufacturer because it's not acceptable, I don't think, to say that you're not going to, that you're going to charge a full rebuild of a product because they found a third-party part or repair. I do know it does happen with some manufacturers and suppliers, and those typically are not the ones that PartsSource offers alternative options on from a part perspective. So most of our OEM replacement parts would not fall into that category. And a lot of the suppliers that tend to go down this road are not necessarily ones that we're hosting on our platform, but it is a very good and valid point.
So Mara, there's another question related to suppliers who consistently have backorder issues or are not providing quality parts based on your data. What happens? How does PartsSource handle that situation?
Yeah, that's an excellent question as well. I would say that because we're tracking the delivery of every single part that we ship on behalf of our customers direct from the suppliers, we have access to know which suppliers consistently have back orders in place and which ones statistically have lead times when you are placing a part order with them. So one of the ways that we try to alleviate this for our customers is that we will display item information or lead times or back orders that we know of in our catalog directly. So when you're searching for a part, that information will appear to you, that there is a lead time or a back order on a particular item. Another thing that we will be launching with our PartsSource Pro customers this summer is that we like to say that the only thing in the PartsSource warehouse is data, but we do in fact stock some strategically stocked parts, and we do that based on data. We do analytics to determine where we can strategically stock a few select parts that will alleviate stockouts for our PartsSource Pro customers, and that basically has a direct impact on equipment uptime and making sure that we keep downtime as low as possible for our customers. And then I see another question that's come in. Is the PartsSource formulary service complementary to the healthcare organization's ERP item master? How do the two relate to each other? So this is an excellent question as well. So it really depends on the particular healthcare system and how they are integrated with us. PartsSource does offer quite a few ERP integrations, and typically it's in the form of a punch-out catalog. So that information actually directly feeds back into the ERP system via the PartsSource platform when a punch-out is utilized for many of the major ERP systems that are out there. So the formularies are actually set up within the PartsSource platform. They're not set up within the ERP system necessarily. And the reason that this is because most healthcare organizations are not setting up every single clinical engineering part as an item in their master catalog in their ERP because there's such a long tail of spend within the HTM supply chain in essence. And because parts prices are transactional and can change quite often, it's a different scenario than setting up item master for a consumable or a supply through the regular supply chain methodology. So in the scenario for HTM supply chain, a punch out via the ERP catalog into the PartsSource catalog works very, very well. And then we house the formulary rules within the PartsSource platform.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Mara, for your time on this, this very important topic related to formularies. Mara's contact information is currently on the screen. Feel free to reach out to her either via email or via phone, and she'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have as you contemplate formularies for your HTM group. Thank you again for joining the PartsSource webinar. Again, we will be sending via email a link to this broadcast, and I hope you have a great day.